Well, welcome back to the garage. Gerald here with you, of course. It is May. It is the week prior to the Cannes Film Festival in France, in the south of France, starting next week. That's going to be the first real kind of like peek behind the curtain as to what we can maybe put some of these predictions into focus. Now, there are a couple of films, literally only two that I can think of, that have come out so far this year that are at least going to be in the awards discussion. We've gotten trailers for a few other ones, including Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, which came out literally yesterday as I'm recording. And I did a trailer reaction here on the channel. You can check that out. There's been some discourse around it, and particularly the use of the word daddy. I hear that word frequently in my own life. I won't tell you in what capacity. It's because I have small children. On these Power Rankings video, those first few, I just do the top 6, like top of the line categories, which would be all 4 acting categories, picture, and director. So that's what I'm going to update on this video as well. Before we get started, there are timestamps down below, but I want to do a couple of housekeeping things and ask you guys for a favor. If you found yourself here and you're a first-time visitor and you love the Oscars or award season, I am a movie channel, but I really tend to lean heavily into that. So if that seems interesting to you, if you love award season just like I do, or you're just a movie junkie in general, please consider subscribing. Because since the past Oscars this past March, my subscriber count has kind of flatlined a little bit. I'll get a handful here and there, but it always really spikes in like the last quarter of the year up until like February or March. And then it just goes nowhere because, of course, it's not Oscar season for normal people, only for people like me in their garage talking about it by themselves. And then if you've been here before and you love my coverage of the Oscars, or at least respect it, then you can consider channel memberships. It would really help me out. But you can click join down below and read all about that. I try to take care of my members. I give away a free movie every month. You get all of my rankings and countdown videos early before the general public, and a lot of other cool things, custom emotes and badges and all that kind of stuff. But at the very minimum, please consider pressing that subscribe button. Let me get into my top of the line updates for Power Rankings. We're going to start with supporting actress. In looking at the slide, I switched Anne Hathaway for The Odyssey and Mariana DiGirolamo for Wild Horse 9. Here on May 6th, as I'm recording, I'm pretty much going all in on Martin McDonagh finally getting a lot of notoriety and accolades this season with Wild Horse 9. It strikes me as a bit of a balance between In Bruges and like the Banshees of Inisherin. And the more he goes on in his career, the more successful he tends to become during awards season. I've heard that Mariana has the standout, at least supporting performance in the film, but there are several actors, male actors in the film that have supporting roles too, that are also going to be standouts, but maybe not as much as her. So that might make a little more sense when you guys see what my mentality is. I don't know, obviously, especially this early in the game, but if Wild Horse 9 and McDonagh are as successful as collecting gold statues as I think they will be, at least right now on May 6th, then I think she could be the winner of this group. Anne Hathaway was my number one when I did the round one. She's still really highly for me. I did see that trailer and I loved it. I know there's been a lot of divisiveness on it. We'll talk a little bit more about it as this video goes on because the Odyssey is going to show up in a lot of places for me, at least right now. I do think it's a pretty heavy tech player, along with a movie like Dune Part 3. I want both of them to kind of be in the mix when you're talking about Best Picture, because we get 10 there, of course. And then when the technical stuff, which I won't be going over on this video, but, stuff like visual effects, cinematography, right, score. I mean, that's Ludwig Göransson doing the score for The Odyssey. I mean, he's like, Jordan in the 90s right now when it comes to film scores. So I feel really good about that, among other things. Is there a standout in the trailer when it comes to supporting? Because we know Matt Damon is likely the only lead in the film, the only one that would categorize as such. And we'll get there in a moment. And there is a supporting that really, really stood out in that trailer. Now, we will talk about it when we get to that slide. And you probably know who it is if you saw the trailer. I'm going to talk about that. But I do think that we saw enough of Anne Hathaway as Penelope in that. I felt really good about the range of her performance. So I feel good about leaving her in the 5, okay? When you get past Mariana and Anne Hathaway, I've got 3 debuts that were not on my 10 for supporting actress last month when I did this. I'm going to talk about all of them just briefly, but to round out my what would be nominated 5 right now in this category is Sandra Hüller for Project Hail Mary, Daisy Edgar-Jones for a movie called A Place in Hell. Hold that thought. I'll talk about that one a little bit. And Tao Okamoto for All of a Sudden from renowned filmmaker Hamaguchi, who, of course, had a lot of success with Drive My Car a few years ago. Again, I'm going on kind of what I said with Mariana at number 1 there. When it comes to Tao, I'm kind of going on what I've been hearing and in terms of standout performances. And that's what I'm deciding to go with. Plus, you got to have these days a little bit of international flair in the mix, which I love, but it's just becoming a trend. You're not going to have 5, American actresses or 5, just well-known U.S. names, I don't think. I think we're kind of past that for the most part, unless it's just undeniable. So I've got a couple in the mix with Mariana, who I believe is Italian, and Okamoto, who I think is Japanese. So when it comes to Daisy Edgar Jones and A Place in Hell, we have Sense and Sensibility coming out this year too. I'm kind of in a holding pattern with that movie. I am going to talk about it a little bit when I get to my Best Picture slide, but when I heard that they were releasing A Place in Hell on December 25th, Christmas Day, I also know Neon Studios has it. Obviously, they've been wildly successful. And I've got Michelle Williams, who is in the lead category, I presume would be, very high as a possibility. We'll get there in a moment. So could Daisy Edgar Jones come along with that? Also, a little bit of a bias on my side, and I'll admit that. But when you're making Oscar predictions in April and May and June, I mean, you're guessing. You're using data from, history and like people and their names and the weight of their credibility in the industry. But I think it could be a wave situation. But my bias that I wanted to mention is Chloe Demont, the female filmmaker that we have here, because I'm looking at, and I don't want to get off track because we're going to look at director in a little bit, but I'm looking at all that stuff and I'm like, where's the diversity? Where's the representation? Are we really going to have 5 white dudes in director again? It's been a while. They've been better about that as of late. And I'm really looking forward to this film. It sounds like it's going to be an acting showcase, which is another reason why I think it could be a 1-2 punch with Williams and Edgar Jones. So I'm going to put her in there for now. When it comes to Sandra Hüller for Project Hail Mary, I'm kind of coming around a little bit on that movie as a whole because, we'll probably talk about it, but Narnia got delayed to next year. That was a considerable assumption could be made that was a blockbuster or going to be one. It was going to have an IMAX release from Netflix for the first time. It's Greta Gerwig, we already mentioned a couple times on this video. A lot of big people in it. Narnia is a huge name. It was going to be a family. It was going to bring in the family draw plus the critical appeal. So I was under the impression Narnia is probably going to get like 10 plus nominations, which would take away from some of those other blockbuster type films, of which one, Project Hail Mary, might be one of the better ones, but at the same time, it would have to extend its longevity because it came out in March. So it would have to ride that wave for, 10 months versus a few months. So there's other movies that are also in that realm, like your Dune Part 3, your Odyssey, but those with much more prominent filmmakers, Lord Miller, all the respect in the world to them, they're not going to be the industry or the Oscar darlings that somebody like a Christopher Nolan or I want to say Denis Villeneuve, even though they won't give him a freaking director nomination yet. But you know what I mean? They tend to rain down nominations on his projects. That's why I had the reservations. But in certain categories, Narnia fell off, which kind of opens up a spot for that blockbuster kind of type film. I'm going to bank on it right now. And I know a lot of you have been for a while. I don't feel really, really good about it. I don't. I think it could get into the 10. I know a lot of you say that it's going to get into the 10. But one thing's for sure. Sandra Hüller in that film, this is my opinion, but she's the best performance in it. She gives the standout scene of the year, the number 1 movie scene of the year so far. And I think when the year's all said and done, it's going to be, if not definitely one of the top 5 most memorable scenes of the year. Her karaoke scene to Harry Styles in that film, which carries so much gravity and weight to it, and just was a 2 or 3 minute snapshot of that film and what the various characters were going through as they're facing essentially annihilation and the end of the world, right? And it was beautiful. It was frightening. She was charismatic. She kind of took off her, strict, stern veneer and kind of showed her emotions. And then when you look up there at the bench, this is a fucking hodgepodge here. When I'm looking over here on the screen, guys, I have a list of the ones I removed. So as you can see, I have 3 debuts there with the graphics. The ones that ended up getting removed were Demi Moore, who I had in for a movie called Strange Arrivals. First of all, it's not going to get released this year. I found out it's probably going to be 2027 from A24, I think. So that's why she's not in here first and foremost. But secondly, I heard she's probably a lead performance. So she's out. Mason Reeves I had in for Josephine, which was a small indie that did really well at Sundance, winning the top prize there. She's the young actress, I think 11 or 12 years old in the film. And I also heard that she's a lead. We'll get to that slide in a minute, but she's not in supporting actress anymore. And then Octavia Spencer I removed for a movie coming out, which is an iteration of Death of a Salesman. And that's not coming out this year, or at least it's not expected to come out this year. It could possibly premiere at one of the later festivals like New York or TIFF. I don't really feel good about any of the bench 5 that I have here, but I'll just run through them real quick. Frances McDormand for Jack of Spades, which is the Coen brothers film. or one of the Coen, I think it's Ethan Coen. Angelina Looking Glass, I'm leaving in my 10. For The Rivals of Uzziah King, I was so high on that performance last year, in 2025, for last year's predictions. And the movie didn't get picked up and released in time to be eligible for the Oscars this past year. But it will be this year. It comes out in August from Black Bear Pictures. And I know a lot of people are concerned about that. And between me and you, I haven't seen anybody list her in their early predictions unless I've missed it. I went back after I did my April video and nobody was mentioning her. Literally, I'm the only one. So that probably tells me she's probably not getting in. Or if she does, I'm going to look like a genius, an early, Nostradamus situation. I would love to see that for the representation and for that performance in Uzziah King. I think the release and the Black Bear campaign, depending on how large that ends up being, or maybe non-existent, I don't know. But I think that it could be a situation where she's like a Amy Madigan, where she's the only nomination from the film. I don't really believe it's going to get anything else, at least not right now. We'll see how much they push it in the coming months. Carrie Condon I left in for pressure, although she did drop down. And then to round out the 10, I have Hunter Schafer for Cry to Heaven, which is a Tom Ford film, and Sophie Wilde, another young actress. She was in Talk to Me a couple years ago, for Digger. A lot of people have Sandra Hüller in for Digger as well, but I think with the success of her performance in that one scene I'm talking about, but not to mention the rest of the film and how well it's done, I mean, that's the movie that kind of made her a name with people that didn't know who she was, I mean, us that follow award season knew her from Anatomy of a Fall and some other things, but, if it was just a moviegoer, who's that? And they know who Sandra Hüller is now. Sophie Wilde, it's a swing. It's a swing. I have no idea. Sometimes I don't do these early predictions. I look at the craft and how good the actress is. A lot of people are putting Wunmi Masaku in for The Social Reckoning because she just got nominated this past year. And I understand that logic and I actually respect that logic. And that would probably be a better number 10 right now than Sophie Wilde. But when I went back and looked after doing that April video, because I had her at number 10 then as well, nobody had her. I'm looking at the Award Expert app. She is, let me see how far down I have to scroll before I even see her. I just scrolled down to number 100, the top 100 on the Award Expert app for supporting actress, and she's not in the top 100. And I have her in my top 10. I know that Sophie Wilde's talented, and I think that she could do something. Same thing with Hunter Schafer, the trans actress who was in Cuckoo last year. She's obviously gained fame on Euphoria and been in some other things. She's in Mother Mary right now, actually, in cinemas. I'm a huge fan of her, so that's also another one where I'm like, I'm putting it out there. I did it last year with Mother Mary, and then it didn't come out. It came out this month. Really, for this slide, I have no fucking idea at all, so that's what I'm going with for supporting actress. Real quick on the pressure thing, I did my fantasy draft with Matt Fuji and my buddy Cody Derricks, and, it was all in good fun because we're real life friends, but, they kind of picked on me a little bit for having pressure. That's the new wartime film with Andrew Scott. Brendan Fraser plays Dwight Eisenhower. It's about the D-Day invasion during World War II. It could be Nuremberg. It could be, and I've seen a couple of you mention that in the comments, but it could also not be. It could also be a war film that they love. They got a lot of nominations. Private Ryan, All Quiet on the Western Front. Do I think it's going to be, one of the greatest war films ever made, like Saving Private Ryan? No, not necessarily. I do know that based on the subject matter, it's the type of film that they would historically go for. The difference is the new Academy and the modern patterns that I was talking about might not line up with it, but there's no better option for me right now where it's like obviously not Carrie Condon, and the same thing with some other categories. So even though I'm not putting pressure as highly on my list after hearing some of the feedback from those buddies of mine, I am leaving it in the conversation, at least till it comes out, which will be at the end of this month. So when I do this video in June, it might not even be on one slide. We'll see. We'll see the reception, the reviews, the scores, and if it is actually Oscar friendly. And looking at supporting actor, I'll just run through my 5 real quick. I haven't moved John Goodman for Digger. Then I've got Malkovich for Wild Horse 9. I just recently added Steve Buscemi for Wild Horse 9. Paul Giamatti for the Eisenberg musical that is yet to receive a title for some reason. Let's title that thing, please. I've heard The Big Break. I've heard No One Cares, I think, which I don't like. Let's title it. What would be hilarious is that they don't, and they just leave it as Eisenberg Untitled Musical, and that's the title. That'd be hilarious. And then, yes, I did leave Coleman Domingo in the top 5 for Michael, his portrayal of Joseph Jackson, but he is on the thinnest sheet of ice that I could tell you. He just needs one of these other people to break through because Michael's not going to be strong enough to carry anything else, I don't think, with the exception of maybe hair and makeup. That's literally the only 2 that I think it would get. And I think Jafar Jackson is phenomenal. Frankly, a little more deserving performance-wise than Coleman Domingo, what he did as Michael. But this is the Academy we're talking about. So Coleman could get on in his name. He's got multiple nominations. He would basically be pulling a Rustin here. he would be getting nominated. That was a lead performance, but he would be getting nominated, and that would be it for Rustin, or for Michael, I mean. Giamatti, it's Paul Giamatti in a musical that sounds like he's going to be able to have the time of his life. It's going to be adjacent to performing to Hollywood movies. It's a musical, but you know what I mean? Broadway theater kind of situation. John Goodman has never won an Academy Award, never been nominated, which is literally insane to me. We got to make it happen. I think Digger and Iñárritu, specifically that director, we'll talk about Tom Cruise in a minute, but he can get actors nominated when it's like they're veterans. I'm not saying he's the one that does it necessarily, but the collaboration seems to bring out the best in some of these actors. If they've been looked over in the past, maybe that comes to an end. Steve Buscemi is almost certainly a supporting performance in Wild Horse 9. Steve Buscemi's another actor, just like John Goodman, who is missing the accolades that he should have. He really just doesn't have enough love from awards season, but the Oscars especially. So I've got him in there. But I do think that if it comes down to him versus Malkovich or Rockwell, they could both get in, for that film. I think all three of those actors get in. I didn't watch this month, but when I did my video last month and I went back like a week later and I watched some other folks that I follow and respect and read some different stuff, a lot of them have Sam Rockwell here in supporting and John Malkovich in lead. If there's any definitive proof or substantial, Searchlight said this, or this is what somebody from Searchlight told me, please let me know. But otherwise, if it's all hearsay and speculation, first of all, we've seen category fraud every year since I was born. I mean, we just don't know. Secondly, without that confirmation, the studio is going to decide what's best for the film's success, I would think. There will be category fraud, I'll just go ahead and tell you. But for me, when I watch the trailers, for Wild Horse 9, I think to myself, in my head, when you watch that trailer and when you think about historically what McDonough does when he's a director, John Malkovich is the supporting role. John Malkovich is the Brendan Gleeson, in my opinion. Sam Rockwell is the lead in that trailer. He's the one leading the mission, the hijinks. He's the one kind of in charge of their trip, right, to Easter Island. He's the Colin Farrell, and that was a Banshees reference, or I guess in Bruges too, kind of. But you know what I mean? That was a Banshees reference because they both got nominated, right? Now, they're co-leads, right? Banshees of Inisherin, Gleeson and Farrell are co-leads. I mean, say whatever you want to say. You can look at screen time. It might be, 55-45 or 60-40. I mean, I don't know. The movie kind of centers around them together, their symbiotic, existence together on that island. So that's going to be the same thing in Wild Horse 9, I bet you. I bet you it's going to be Malkovich and Rockwell together, basically, for, 80% of the movie. And they're going to be co-leads. There's going to be very few scenes where Rockwell's by himself or Malkovich is by himself. And, that's just is what it is. But are they both going to get categorized as lead, or is somebody going to go to supporting? I don't know. And a lot of people are like, oh, Rockwell's the supporting. I don't fucking know, But my movie brain and my mentality, especially in a McDonough project, tells me that trailer and that story that I read about, Malkovich is supporting. He's the kind of comic relief in the backseat, making jokes, accidentally killing dudes. It's a very abstract mentality. And in looking at, I'll go back to the award expert app real quick. I got to scroll up 99 places because y'all didn't put Sophie Wilde in. Well, let's see. You guys have got Sam Rockwell in the top 5. When it comes to Malkovich, I'm seeing if he's listed down here in supporting. I've gone through the top 50. He's not in supporting for the award expert community. Why? That's all I want to know is why. If you do have a reason that's this is Searchlight's, angle, then please share that with me and I'll use that going forward. But right now I'm just kind of using my intuition when it comes to award season that Malkovich predominantly, even though it's a co-lead, is probably going to be supporting, and then Steve Buscemi is almost certainly supporting. And then looking over there at the bench real quick, I'll just run through these. Mark Ruffalo for Being Human. I hate the title, but I'll talk a little bit about that movie. Jeremy Strong, who plays Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Reckoning. Antonio Banderas is a new entry for me for Tony. Robert Pattinson is a new entry for me for The Odyssey. And Brendan Fraser, there you go, for Pressure. I told you guys, I'm riding. I'm the only one riding. You know that Big Bird meme or whatever where he's in the cart, let's ride at dawn, bitches. That's me for Pressure. I don't know. Again, next month it might not even be mentioned. So I talked about Brendan Fraser a little bit already, but I think that could tie to the hair and makeup, right? With Pressure, he's becoming Dwight Eisenhower. His scenes look really juicy in the trailer. The wartime narrative. It could be Nuremberg. It could be All Quiet. I don't know which. So I'm hanging tight at least till the film comes out. Pattinson's kind of juicy. So let me hold down for a second. I'll go to number 6 real quick. So Mark Ruffalo in Being Human, multiple nominee. And I'm thinking about this film and I'm like, all right, it's a biopic, right? It's based on a woman named Judy Heumann who is disabled. And she was a big fighter, like a justice fighter and a protester and a philanthropist for disability rights in the 1970s. So it's going to be a period setting. All right, hear me out here. It is directed by a female, but it's Sion Heder, who was the director of Coda, which was an Oscar-winning film. All right, it's being distributed by Apple, and a lot of people in this space kind of overlook Apple in a lot of cases. They do. Sometimes that's warranted. Sometimes it's like, well, they didn't really have anything this year. But there's other times where, they're in the conversation. And when it comes to the quality of the filmmaking, I think they're right up there. Is the campaigning right up there? Is the money flowing as heavily as studios like Netflix? Probably not. And that's why the nominations are few and far between. But is it about the quantity or the quality of what's happening over there? This film, being a biopic based on a true story, who also employed a actual disabled person to play the disabled person that the film was based on, I think is going to be a pretty strong narrative for that film. Very, very similar, even though I know they're different. Don't come at me. I realize they're completely different. But I'm saying generically, it's very similar to Coda, where they had actual deaf people playing the deaf characters. Mark Ruffalo is a multiple nominee. I feel like he was really, really close to winning the Spotlight year and didn't. I think that his most recent one was for Poor Things, right? I think they love nominating him. I'll just put it that way. That's the easiest way I can phrase it. And he's always turning in great work, even with the rom-com stuff. But this, to me, is Oscar material. Jeremy Strong in The Social Reckoning is a big question mark for me right now. I left him alone. He's a powerful actor, too. Success on TV with Succession, right? But he even got nominated for playing a very unsavory, basically villain or antagonist. If you could have an antagonist in a Trump film, I don't know. But, it wasn't like he was an adored figure in history or in that film. And he got nominated for that, as did Sebastian Stan, by the way. So him playing Zuckerberg is a very similar kind of like wheelhouse, right? It's like not necessarily a bad guy, right? But is seen as being bad because of XYZ. Or maybe he is a bad guy, but we're not going to know truly if he is because, we don't live with him. We don't know him personally. And we'll probably do a really good job here of towing that line, of making you kind of think, is he really a piece of shit? Or is like the way this is framed? Or is he a piece of shit around certain people and he's nice at home? Or like what's going on? So I feel good about Jeremy Strong just for the acting prowess in general. And I've got him at 7. But, again, I said Coleman Domingo is barely hanging on. Antonio Banderas, that trailer came out for Tony yesterday as I'm recording. And I kind of always thought he might be something in supporting actor because, again, it's another one that has been nominated before and the Oscars know him, they love him. And, I thought he might get something with Baby Girl a couple years ago, which ended up blanking, right? But I thought that might be a thing. Maybe this is it. Maybe he's back with this. He plays essentially the mentor to a young Anthony Bourdain and kind of gets him into cooking and becoming a chef, which is what he plays in the film. He has his own restaurant, makes his own menu, and it's going to be very emotional and funny and poignant. And it doesn't really look like any of the Matt Johnson films that we've gotten so far, which I've loved. And I love that this one's probably going to be a little bit different as well. So I've got Antonio Banderas in my 10 for the first time. And then let's go ahead and touch on Robert Pattinson from The Odyssey. Daddy, if you will. Look, guys, I have him in another category we'll talk about in a moment. I didn't want to put him in supporting, or let me rephrase that. I do want to put him in supporting, but I couldn't bring myself to do it for Dune Part 3. Austin Butler didn't get in there for Dune Part 2 for playing a very juicy villain, right? Which is a great role. And he was coming off an Oscar nomination that year. Robert Pattinson's never been nominated. And I'm like going, I don't know. Is it going to be better than Butler's portrayal was in Part 2? Is the movie going to hit like Part 1 or Part 2 did? We still don't really know about that even. I think it looks great and I can't fucking wait for it. And I'm keeping it in the mix until it's obviously not in the mix. But I just, I don't want the whole Twilight thing to haunt him. And, it never happened or at least to date, it didn't happen for an actor like Jim Carrey, because he started his career playing Ace Ventura and, talking out of his butt cheeks and that kind of stuff. And the Academy just never put their pinkies down, when they were sipping their tea with somebody like Jim Carrey. And Robert Pattinson did the Twilight films and was a teen heartthrob. And, Timothy's kind of going through that right now, Chalamet. It's like, are they going to see him as more than that? And I hope they do because the performative stuff in there, the bones in there are phenomenal. He's one of the best that we have right now. The drama, Dune Part 3 coming up, The Odyssey. So I'm going to put him in here. He looked really fucking good in that trailer, I thought. Even if you didn't like the trailer or the dialogue, he's not the screenwriter, he's the actor. And he was really hamming it up. This is going to be a role that he's going to eat. Okay, let's just put it that way. He is going to eat every single crumb. All right, I'll try to speed it up a little bit here. Let's go to lead actress real quick. There actually wasn't a ton of changes on this slide from last month. It's the same 10 with the exception of one debut here. On the left side there, the starting 5, I've got Sandra Hüller winning right now. And that was the same thing last month for a movie called Rose. She did win the Berlin Film Festival acting prize for that. I've heard phenomenal things about her performance. It's transformative. She takes on the appearance of a man during the war so that she can fight in the war and live in the village there and basically not be homeless. So she kind of passes off as a male soldier. She has a giant scar on her face that is obviously going to be done in prosthetics. So the makeup could tie to that. The international feature nomination could tie to that. The Berlin success was also a thing for Blue Moon last year, which led Ethan Hawke to eventually getting a nomination as lead actor. I left her at number 1 for now. A lot of people are going to put her in for Fatherland, which real quick, I'll just touch on at number 8 over there as the debut for me. With this being the first year that an actor could get nominated twice in the same category for different movies, that could be her. I haven't seen either film. So until I see the results from the reviews and see them for myself, I'm only going to pick one right now. And I started out going with Rose. I've been saying that for almost 2 months now. So I'm sticking with Rose. I've seen that the majority of people are going with Fatherland. But Fatherland, to me, just sounds a little bit more like a two-hander with Ziegler. And I don't know. I don't know who's the predominant standout of those two performances. They're probably co-leading that film as a two-hander. Whereas in Rose, it's probably her, kind of running the show there. Michelle Williams jumped up. I did have her last month in the 10. I had her number 9 last month. So she jumped all the way up to number 2, and I almost put her at number 1 because I saw that December 25th release, which is also why I had Daisy Edgar-Jones in there. But I also didn't want to go crazy because a lot of my bias is cooked into that, like I told you. And, I just, much like Robert Pattinson, although she's been nominated multiple times, but much like him, I'm ready for her to get a win. I thought she was going to win for her portrayal of Marilyn Monroe, and I was pulling for that all year, and it didn't happen. A Place in Hell could be juicy enough. Chloe DeMont, female director, is going to really know how to direct these ladies to give these powerhouse performances that are going to bounce off each other. High stakes. I'm all about it. I love Michelle Williams, and she is owed and a statue. She's owed one right now. So I'm hoping it hits with A Place in Hell. I left Mikey Madison and Renate Reinsve alone at 3 and 5, respectively. Fjord is another international film that's going to be premiered. I think it's international. Sorry, let me rephrase that. I think that's an international film, but there's been some debate over the amount of English language that's used in the film, which would lend to the eligibility for the Oscars. So I guess we got to kind of wait and see, but that one also will be playing at Cannes next week. So we'll have a lot more information on that when I do my video next month. But right now I think it's an international player, but that could end up not being the case. But I do still think it's a player regardless. The Social Reckoning we've already talked a little bit about with Jeremy Strong. Mikey Madison won for Honora. She's one of my queens. You guys know that. I got the Honora shit behind me. Well, you can't see the posters off camera. Knowing how she is in real life, right? And seeing her in those interviews, seeing her on the talk shows, listening to her on the podcast, even during the Honora tour, and then seeing what she did in Sean Baker's movie, I go, what the she's an actress, because she's doing things like nothing like her actual self. And I'm talking about, obviously I don't know her, but you know what I mean? What I see of her in the public eye. And that just always says something to me when somebody just completely becomes somebody else on camera. That's going to be a transformation. She's going to be great. So I've got her in there. I'm leaving her in there for now. If The Social Reckoning does not hit and it's just not good enough to get the love from the Academy, then she'll probably fall off. So I don't think she's going to be a lone nomination for it. I do think it needs other stuff. Screenplay is obviously in the mix because Aaron Sorkin. We'll talk about a couple other categories here in a minute, but I'm leaving her in the 5 right now. And then Cynthia Erivo dropped down from, I think I had her 2, I believe, last month, but she dropped down for Prima Facie, which is a musical, I believe, and I know she plays the lead character who is like a one-woman show, I think, on Broadway, or maybe it's off-Broadway, but musical, a stage show. And this is the film version of that. My understanding is it's coming out this year. I think she would be a sole nominee for that film, but of course I haven't seen it. And to be honest with you, I know very little about it, but I am very confident in Erivo's prowess and her talent. And, her Wicked nomination was one of my favorites of the last few years. And she's very, very close to an EGOT. I don't know if she could win on a sole nominated film. That would be very hard to do unless you're Amy Madigan, I guess. Ruth Madeley, on the other hand, did drop out of the 5. I had her on there to start these predictions back in April. She's the disabled actress who's playing Judy Heumann, a disabled person. I think that's going to go a long way with the voters. I do, but I want to wait and see what Apple does with the campaign. You know, I've also got high hopes for director. We'll talk about that in a second. Julianne Moore, you don't need a lot of commentary there. Kind of like what I said with Paul Giamatti. It's an Eisenberg film. He's directing it. You know, I loved A Real Pain. So, you know, the writing, the directing is going to be great. Paul Giamatti, Julianne Moore star as these kind of like aging actors who put on a community theater stage show. I think that's roughly the outline. Yeah, I'm in. And I think Julianne Moore, previous winner, previous nominee, could get in there. I've got her right outside the 5 currently, but it's a definite possibility. We talked about Sandra Hüller's other, I'd assume, lead performance for Fatherland, which could very easily be the Rose one. You know, those two could switch sides on this slide very easily. And that'll maybe come a little bit more into focus after the Cannes Film Festival, because there's going to be a lot of people that saw Rose in Berlin and see Fatherland at Cannes. And I'm going to be following those folks to kind of get that comparison. And then to round out my 10, I didn't do anything with those 2 spots because I don't really know what to do. I already talked about Hamaguchi's film All of a Sudden, and if that's a player, which I hope it is, beyond just like screenplay picture, maybe international, right? But aside from that stuff, let's get some other top of the line stuff for him, right? So Virginia Efira, I do have in the possibilities now for All of a Sudden. She's also in Parallel Tales this year, which is another one that could be a player that I removed from my possibles. Penelope Cruz, another one that needs very, very little commentary, much like Julianne Moore. You know, she's been nominated multiple times. This is a Florian Zeller film called Bunker. So obviously I'm leaning a little bit more towards the father Zeller versus the son Zeller. All right, now looking at lead actor, we had a ton of debuts in this category. The folks that I threw in here for the very first time may have been in the conversation in general, but not on my video last month. The top 3 I left alone, I didn't even reorder them, is Tom Cruise for Digger, Sam Rockwell for Wild Horse 9. I already talked about my mentality there, but that could end up being supporting. Matt Damon for The Odyssey. Multiple nominee, Christopher Nolan. I know a lot of people might be rolling their eyes about that one, but he's at least in the top 10. Right now, I think with his past successes with the Academy, he's got just as good a shot as anybody. Here, maybe it would be a swap out for like Sebastian Stan, perhaps. But right now, I left him in the 5. That could all change next month. And John Turturro, I premiered last month thinking I was a prodigy genius. And then I went and watched a few of my buddies' videos, like I said, and I saw that a couple other people have him in the mix as well. So that's great that I at least feel somewhat vindicated there. But I think he's an actor that's also hasn't received that nomination that he should have, really multiple, to be honest with you, that just turns in stout work every single time. And from what I hear, my buddy Cody Derrick saw it, my friend Matt saw it. He's the movie. He is the film, the heart of the film, and really gives the performance of a career that is like undeniable. I did premiere Robert Pattinson, who I talked a little bit about on the supporting side earlier for The Odyssey, but here for primetime, he plays Chris Hansen, who is the reporter for, I think, ABC, that started a project that ended up leading to How to Catch a Predator, which was the film about, I can't say it on YouTube probably, but, you know, bad dudes that did bad things. And he kind of brought all that to light and brought justice to a lot of those guys. And I think it's the story of that show's inception and his kind of desire to bring a lot of those guys down. And Robert Pattinson is going to tear it up. I already told you that I can't wait for him to get a nomination. So I'm putting him in the lead actor 5 right now, based on what I've heard out of the test screenings and what I know about that being a real life biopic and being a pretty important narrative. Over on the bench, I took out Nicholas Hoult, Jeffrey Wright for Death of a Salesman because that's not coming out, and Cry to Heaven should be on this slide somewhere, but I don't know who the hell the lead actor is. I thought about putting Owen Wilson in here, who of course was very popular for Adolescence last year. He might be the lead as the young lead in Cry to Heaven. I thought it was maybe Nicholas Hoult, but I guess that character has played various ages. So I don't know, maybe there's not a lead. Maybe there's not enough of a performance that's like, this is the performance. Maybe it's just a combination of all of them. That could hurt it at the end of the day when it comes to being nominated, definitely winning. So I dropped him out, but I did leave Sebastian Stan and Jafar Jackson right where they were at 6 and 9 respectively there. I've already talked about Jafar Jackson. I don't think the reviews needed to be better. If you were above a 60 on Rotten Tomatoes, I could see with a straight face putting him in the 5, but it's like 40 or something like that. He's not going to get nominated with those numbers. Metacritic's even worse, I think. So even though it's going to make a shit ton of money, which sometimes can offset that a little bit, I don't think it's going to be enough. And the fact that they know there's a part 2 coming and that he's obviously playing Michael in part 2, with a lot more depth to the character, I would assume, than just concert footage, if you will. They might hold out for that too. So, and he'll have a couple more years of acting under his belt and everything else. So I do think he's still in the conversation. I'm not completely checked out on him. I do think it's still a very, very far, like 1% possibility. But right now, 9 seems generous. So I'm just going to leave him there for now. And then my premieres this month were Hans Ziegler for Fatherland, although I had him last month, but I had him in supporting. I've since learned that he's lead and that he plays essentially the character that the movie's based on an event that he went through with his daughter. So that's most likely a lead performance. So the initial kind of intel that I got about him being supporting and Sandra being lead was possibly inaccurate. So I did move him over here to the lead slide around the same position at number 8 there. Number 7, Ryan Gosling for Project Hail Mary. We did talk about that one a little bit. I'm going in on Project Hail Mary a little bit more than I was in April, really a lot more because I didn't have it anywhere except for like a near miss in Best Picture. But I think with Gosling, with having the nominations in the past and knowing that he can get nominated for lighthearted performances, if you will, or performances that don't necessarily come with a lot of crying or outburst moments or Oscar clips. Barbie is a perfect example, actually. Then I feel better about it, and I think that his relationship to Rocky and goes a long way in this movie. And it's, aside from that voice performance from James Ortiz, at least visually, it's a one-man show in a lot of cases when we're not dealing with the flash forwards and whatnot. So I feel good about it being in the 10. I don't think he would get a nomination for Project Hail Mary with some of these other names that I have listed. But depending on how successful that movie is and how much they go in on it, if it takes away nominations from other ones like The Odyssey or Dune Part 2 because of that blockbuster kind of hodgepodge. And then Rami Malek is a debut for me in a movie called The Man I Love. This is the Ira Sachs film that will also be debuting at Cannes next week, so I'll have a lot more to say about it then, most likely. But it doesn't have a distributor yet, so I left him at number 10. He obviously won for Bohemian Rhapsody like 5 years ago, so he is an Oscar winner. No matter what you think of that win, which, by the way, I didn't like that win, even though I like him. Say whatever you will, he's an Oscar winner. He's in the club, if you will. But it says that this is set in the vibrant era of 1980s New York, and it follows Jimmy George, which he plays. He's an artist, and I think he's dealing with the HIV virus, the AIDS virus, at the early kind of stages of that deadly disease in the 80s. And, it's going to be topical. It's going to be timely. Previous Oscar winner. It's going to be a period setting in the 80s. Ira Sachs, well respected in the industry, a Cannes film. You got to have some Cannes representation in your lineups on top of the line. So Rami Malek should be in your back of your head, and he's in the back of my head, which is why I threw him in here at number 10. If that film had a distributor and I knew who the distributor was, like Sony Pictures Classics, right? Think Ethan Hawke for Blue Moon, right? So if Sony Pictures Classics had this, or if they get this, and Rami Malek's in that story that I just read to you from Ira Sachs, I might have him in my top 5 or 6. I mean, he would be a really strong contender at that point. All right, so 2 more slides. I'm not doing myself any favors with the edit here, I guess. But let me run through these last couple because we've already talked about pretty much all these movies, and then we'll wrap up the video. So for my starting 5 for director, Martin McDonagh, Wild Horse 9. I already talked about it. I'm going super all in on Wild Horse 9. Iñárritu for Digger, which is probably the number 2 in terms of strength this year, I'm thinking. Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. He dropped down from the number 1 last week, as did the film. A lot of that has to do with the division, the divisiveness, if you will, over the trailer. I didn't have a problem with the trailer at all. Maybe even more so would be the success of Oppenheimer just 2 years ago. There's been very few, if any. I think there's 2 or 3, maybe even less than that. Maybe there might be 0. I can't remember. A friend of mine told me this stat. But there's only been less than 1 hand, let's put it that way, and it might be 0. Filmmakers who have won Best Picture twice. I'm not talking about director or their films being there. I'm talking about to win the Best Picture prize has only happened literally a few times. So would it happen with those movies so close together? I don't know. It could, of course. It looks epic. I think it's going to be a huge player. I just don't know about it winning at least the top of the line stuff, even though it might be in the top 5 for a lot of those categories, including here at director. We'll see. Paweł Pawlikowski for Fatherland. I moved up. They loved Cold War. He's a great filmmaker. I wanted to have some international kind of appeal here, even though I know that, Iñárritu and Villeneuve all have different lineages and diversity, but they're very well known in the States at the same time. Where Pawlikowski is not so much. I know who he is, and a lot of you watching this video probably know who he is, but it's not like he's a household name as a director. Fatherland is going to be a very important film, again, centered in World War II, which is typically a narrative that they love at the Oscars. I brought him in. I had to replace essentially Greta Gerwig for Narnia. Powell ended up making it here in the 5, and I left Denis Villeneuve in my top 5, guys. Leave me alone, okay? Don't at me, argue with the wall. If you ask me right now on May 6th, and probably up until December when it comes out, or when we start getting reviews, Dune's winning everything. That's what I'm going to tell you. If you ask me right now, I don't have it winning, obviously, but I should say nominated. Dune's going to get nominated for everything. Dune Part 3. That's what I'm going to tell you. That's it. These films, these Dune films, and I'm assuming Part 3 is going to fall right in line. They are, and I know people hate the Lord of the Rings analogy. That's not even really what I'm doing, but they are on that scale. They are massively impressive. And I'm talking about from a filmmaking technique standpoint. It might not be your thing, you know, you might not like sandworms or whatever, and you might not respond to the books and the material, and I get all that. Believe me, you know, a lot of people say Star Wars is too convoluted. They don't respond to Star Wars. It's too confusing. My wife doesn't even like it. Probably shouldn't have told you that. It's the week of May the 4th. Sorry. But look, guys, I just have been watching movies for like 50 years. Literally, I'm old. And I know when I see something and I go, how the hell did this director make all this happen to be this beautiful, this entertaining, and connect to this so much, you know? And there's a handful of directors in the world right now that are doing it every single time they make a movie. I think Denis is one of them. And I think the fact that he has not been nominated for either of those films yet is a literal crime against Hollywood, against movies. I'm not kidding. Am I biased? Yes. But the quality of these films, I don't know why you would argue with that. You might not like them, but I mean, they are so well made, and the crafts and the text continue to get nominated, right? What was the first one? 9 or 10, right? The second one was, I think, it was 6. So let's say this one gets another 6, 7, 8 nominations, right? What is that? That's like, let's just say it gets 6, just for easy math for your boy. That would be 22 nominations for 3 films and not 1 director nomination. And you're telling me you think that doesn't make any sense to me. That doesn't add up. I have a very small channel. All right. I can't even find childcare for my kids long enough to go to some of these festivals and stuff like a lot of my friends do. I'm not the influencer when it comes to this stuff, but I am leaving Denis Villeneuve in for Best Director. Even if I take the film out, even if I end up not being so high on some of the acting, whatever, he's in my Director 5. With this movie coming out in December, which you got to remember, Dune Part 2 did not. It came out very early in the year. Still got 6 nominations. He needs to be recognized for his contributions on those 3 films, for the cinema experience. That's my opinion. I'm sorry to get on my soapbox there. Over there on the bench, I left Tom Ford for Cry to Heaven and Christian Mungiu for Fjord alone at 6 and 7. Jesse Eisenberg dropped down a couple spots there for his musical that still doesn't have a title. You know, I think he could get maybe more of a screenplay play, but I could very easily see him get in. Right now, this early, let's have some women in the conversation. So Sian Heder, already mentioned for Being Human. That's the Apple production. She was the director of Coda, which won Best Picture. And then I put in Chloe DeMont for A Place in Hell. Sounds like it might be a little bit of a thriller, was a dramatic edge, legal stakes, sounds hot, comes out on Christmas Day. I love her as a filmmaker. Everything I've seen, I'm blown away by it. Really good framing in her films. That's a wishful hope diction for sure at my number 10 there. But I do think at this stage of the game in early May, she should be in the conversation, especially for a film that Neon, a pretty good studio when it comes to awards campaigning, decided to release on Christmas Day. That tells me a whole lot there. All right, and the last thing to talk about, and I'm literally just going to run down these and kind of show you where I stand right now. I switched The Odyssey and Wild Horse 9. Wild Horse 9 is now my presumed winner for Best Picture at the Oscars, along with Director, if you remember, and along with Supporting Actress, if you recall, and very much in the running for Supporting Actor and Lead Actor, depending on who gets campaigned for what. So Wild Horse 9 for me is kind of this year's like a Nora. You know, we're just getting like 4 or 5 top of the line nominations and just walking away scot-free. That's kind of what I'm looking at. Then I've got The Odyssey, just switching with it to drop down to number 2. Again, the divisiveness over the trailer. Are they going to do everything they did with Oppenheimer with The Odyssey? Is he really going to be one of the handful of filmmakers that have won Best Picture twice? Yes, I think he could be. I just don't know if it's going to be now, 2 years removed from Oppenheimer. But it could be. But right now I've got it as my runner-up. Then Digger, Fatherland, Fjord all moved up a couple spots to be in the top 5, essentially. A lot of this is going to kind of come into focus a little bit more after Cannes, right? Because Fatherland will be there, Fjord will be there. Neon's obviously a much bigger studio. If they could get Fjord to win that Palm, that would go a long way keeping that in your 10, even though it didn't happen it was just an accident last year. It has happened many, many times. In fact, that's the only exclusion from that stat, with the exception of Titane, which was not an Oscar film. Then over at 6 through 10, I've got Project Hail Mary debuting. I didn't have it last month. I told you guys why. But with Narnia dropping out and with us needing kind of another blockbuster, because I've got 2 to 3 as the cap right now. I'm not going to put more than 3 as like a blockbuster film. Right now, I've got The Odyssey from Universal, Dune from Warner Brothers, as you see, and Project Hail Mary from Amazon MGM. And ironically, that's the one I feel least confident about. Amazon doesn't have a huge track record with Best Picture nominees and definitely not wins. And like I said earlier, it's going to have to sustain its strength for the longest amount of time to the Academy voting, which is not easy to do. I did drop down The Social Reckoning, Cry to Heaven, and Pressure but I'm leaving it in my 10 because I'm me and I want to be the only person that did so if it gets nominated, which it probably won't, but I'm leaving it at number 9 right now. And then Dune Part 3, just like Denis and director, leave me alone. All right, that's what I'm putting my 10 right now. Yes, I think it's going to be nominated for Best Picture. The other 2 were, if this one's too weird, too strange, too out there, then, so be it. I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. But right now, that's what I'm going to go with for my 10. And then let's look at the near misses real quick. The Bench are my 11 through 20. The Eisenberg musical, I'm very high on. I'm a little freaked out about them not titling it yet, and I don't know what festival it's going to premiere at. If it is, probably TIFF maybe, or New York. Being Human in the Best Picture race for the first time. We've already talked about that one. And a movie called Primetime. We talked a little bit about when I showed you my Robert Pattinson bomb drop earlier on the lead actor slide. But yeah, I'm putting that in the mix for Best Picture now too. I don't have it in the 10, but I think it's a very big possibility, right? The justice journalism and the very important narrative in that film, and based on a true story about real people. A24, I feel good about it. I've heard some feedback out of the test screenings for that one that happened very recently. I also told you I'm all in on All of a Sudden, so I left that alone. Saturn Return from Netflix moved up a little bit. And then I've got Rose and Werewolf. My 16 through 20 I don't feel great about, but I left those 2 where they are for now. Werewolf is also a Christmas release, focus features. It could be a Nosferatu situation, basically the same thing, but with a werewolf. I don't know that it's going to be as grandiose and beautiful as that film was when it comes to like production design and lighting, but it could, and it's going to be Robert Eggers, so he's not going to half-ass it. Michael, I left in my 20, although I think that one is dying pretty quickly. I do. In fact, next month I would be shocked if I have it in my 20 still. It dropped down, I think, like 4 or 5 spots this month after seeing all the reviews. When it comes to music biopics, we don't have anything in the mix, really. I think it should be in the mix, but I don't think it's going to be, aside from Coleman Domingo. We talked about Jafar a little bit earlier, too. But hair and makeup and Coleman Domingo, and that's probably all it's going to get. So I've got it way down in 18. And then I did premiere a couple that we talked about already, Sense and Sensibility and A Place in Hell. That one's a bit of a Hope Diction, but I'm really excited for that one. And if nothing else, Michelle Williams getting another nom and possible win. Sense and Sensibility, as I've already said, I'm just kind of waiting and seeing, is it going to be a remake that they're like, oh man, that's the best version I've ever seen of that. We're gonna do that. So there you have it. Those are my updated power rankings. I've been talking for over an hour, and I'm sick. I should not have been doing that, but it's been a lingering sickness. But something that does make me feel better is going over these power rankings with you guys, especially when I read those comments. This is pre-Cannes, so bear with me. I will have another update for you in June after we get a lot of those Cannes results and the feedback. Don't forget, like I said at the top of the video, my call to action, please subscribe to the channel, help me out, get some more eyeballs on this thing. YouTube's not pushing the videos as much as they used to. And with award season being over, that's kind of expected too, so I get it. If you're really into it and you find yourself visiting my channel frequently and you're a big supporter of mine already, then consider being a channel member. You can just click down below where it says join here on YouTube to learn all about that and see all the perks that you will get for doing so, in addition to my never-ending affection and appreciation. I will see you guys out here very soon. Enjoy the Cannes Film Festival. I have an update or 2 for you as the festival is going on here on the channel too, maybe a live stream or something like that. So stick around for all that stuff. I'll see you out here very, very soon in the garage.